Last time we had two firsts for the series. Not only was Quantum of Solace Activision's first steps into this beloved James Bond video game series, but it was also the first Bond game in the Daniel Craig era. The reception was not too great, and I feel like Activision needed to take a step back and figure out what their next move is, and where they needed this series to go. The answer they came up with? Release two Bond games on the exact same day in each of their respective regions. Possibly a little confusing for consumers, but at least they can appeal to two different types of fans to try and bring in as much money as they could. Their solution was to remake a successful favorite and create a brand new story for their second game. By 2010, a new decade was upon us, and there were plans to begin production for the 23rd Bond film and Craig's third outing. However, due to some financial issues, production for the next film had to be suspended until 2011. So basically, Daniel Craig had some time on his hands for 2010. Why not work on a couple new Bond games? I mean, according to longtime Bond film producer Michael G. Wilson, Daniel Craig plays a lot of games and gives us a lot of good criticism. I gotta say, I did not expect that, but hey, that's kinda cool. I wonder what his thoughts on Quantum of Solace were, though. So yeah, one half of Activision's 2010 plan was the idea to completely remake, retell, and reimagine the story of Goldeneye. If they were to remake any Bond game, why not choose arguably the only real successful one? So from a business standpoint, I can see it. The Nintendo 64 was well outdated by 2010, and players were used to the new 7th gen systems. Why not try and draw in new gamers as well as appealing to both fans of GoldenEye, or even people who are simply curious as to whether or not they could pull this off? They would bank on money off of rentals from those people. The other half of their plan was to create a brand new story for a simultaneous release by the name of Bloodstone, but we will be getting to that one in the next part. I thought about putting both of those games together here since that's how the release went, but nah, they're completely separate entities. So as we discussed before, the GoldenEye film came out back in 1995 to kick off the Pierce Brosnan era, and the gold standard of Bond games of the same name came out 2 years later in 1997. So how would Activision choose to approach this one now 13 years later? Keep the authenticity and use Pierce Brosnan's likeness, or adapt to the Craig era and use his instead? Well, it goes a tad deeper than that. See, the GoldenEye game was a Nintendo exclusive and was developed by Rare. Rare was bought by Microsoft in 2002, and as we know, Microsoft is in charge of the Xbox. Since the Bond games are now owned by Activision, there are so many layers going on here. Simply remaking GoldenEye with modern graphics while retaining everything from the original is not really a likely scenario. Microsoft and Nintendo couldn't really agree on the proper approach to having the original N64 game on both the Wii Virtual Console and Xbox Live Arcade, both of their approaches to having players be able to download older games, so a complete redo was in the works instead. So they chose to scrap Brosnan entirely and utilize Daniel Craig in the story instead, as well as have it take place after Quantum of Solace and before the next film, Skyfall. Just trying to wrap your head around this making sense within the universe is pointless. Don't even do it, just go with it. But if you know the story that takes place in GoldenEye, it's very much a story of its time in the mid-90s and before with its flashbacks. For a game to have plot elements involving the Soviet Union and the Cold War in 2010, it would clearly have to be a period piece. But Quantum of Solace utilizes modern technology in both the film and the game, so having this take place after Quantum of Solace would require an altered GoldenEye story. I think the obvious solution would be to just, not have this take place after Quantum of Solace, but they wanted to retain the technology and keep it modernized. But now I'm doing just what I said not to do and not going with it. It's really only altering certain words in the plot, so it's not a huge deal or anything. It's in an alternate universe, just like Nightfire and Everything or Nothing, and all those video game exclusive stories that feature real Bond actors. The decision to keep GoldenEye a Nintendo-only property was retained, at least for about a year. It was released on November 2nd, 2010 in North America, and among the next few days in Australia and Europe for the Nintendo Wii as well as the Nintendo DS. They once again brought back Eurocom for their fourth developed Bond game for the Wii version, and N-Space returning from developing GoldenEye Rogue Agent for the DS. They just love working on games with GoldenEye in the title. N-Space also made Mary-Kate and Ashley's Sweet 16 License to Drive. Sounds like a Bond title. The game would be ported to the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, but not for almost exactly a year later. I'm talking about GoldenEye, not Mary-Kate and Ashley. We'll get to those soon. At the end of 2010, I was recently married and had moved away to a new city. With all of a sudden having to adjust to a completely new life, I was kind of putting video games on the back burner. I would still play some, but there were a lot of adjustments going on. I knew that this Goldeneye remake was being developed, but after not caring about Quantum of Solace, like, at all, I honestly wasn't too excited about this, nor was I in the right mindset for it. My thoughts at the time were that I didn't want to learn motion controls for a game that I was all too familiar with on a Nintendo 64 controller. It just didn't grab me. Not to get too ahead of myself here, but the reception for this was significantly better than Quantum of Solace, so that did help curb my reservations a little bit. With all that said, I've still never even played it. Not once. And I've owned the Wii version for a long time now. In fact, I've never once played any of these final 3 Bond games, so they will all be entirely new to me. So I apologize if I happen to get some minor details wrong or miss something that the game is known for. Just have it be known that I'm teaching about this game while learning about it at the same time. I don't claim to be an expert, I only claim to be Paraspectre. That was kinda lame, but let's check out the back of the box for the Wii version. Goldeneye is back. Get your friends. Yeah, they know what this is about. Bringing multiplayer back to its roots. Yeah, they know what this is about. But most notably, check this out. You can actually use motion controls, or the classic, or GameCube controller here. They finally got it right. That alone makes me more excited to check this one out. And I gotta say, the screenshots look pretty good. The Wii is known for being less powerful than the PS3 or Xbox 360, so if it looks better than Quantum of Solace did, that's yet another improvement. But will it even hold a candle to the N64 original? Let's find out. So right away, we're thrust into some classic Mi6 training to learn the controls and find the control style that suits you. A lot of these recent games have had Mi6 training, and I think it makes sense to have it be an option. I did mess around with the controls to find out what worked best for me, which is getting as close to the N64 control style as I could, so this worked. And you better believe I slapped in my GameCube controller and avoided those motion controls. They chose to bring this back to traditional GoldenEye and keep the first person only. I thought the hybrid method of first and third was a decent idea in Quantum of Solace, but first person is still my preferred style for Bond games. We then get to experience their take on the GoldenEye story. They certainly take some liberties here and change things up while retaining the basic level structure of the dam as much as they could. With this being a remake, it's only natural to compare this to the N64 one as much as possible, as well as seeing what they improved on from Quantum of Solace. After some mission briefing by the once again welcome return of Dame Judi Dench.
Good morning, 007. For the past 3 years, a high-ranking Russian general, Arkady Arumov, has been stealing Russian military equipment and selling it on the black market.
The first thing I notice is that while the game definitely looks good with the much cleaner graphics from the 64 one, you can look at only a few seconds of gameplay and guess that it's a Wii game. Wii games tend to have a certain look to them, and since I'm far from a graphics snob or knowledgeable on the topic, I don't really know why, but this game screams Wii. We see Bond and 006 infiltrating their way into the dam, which is already something different. 006, or Alec Trevelyan, first appeared in the facility in both the movie and the original game, but it makes sense that he's here with Bond. And they didn't even try to make him look like Sean Bean. He looks more like a dollar store Matt Damon. After subduing some guards, you make your way through a very close reenactment of the original dam level until something different happens. There's a mini driving stage. 006 is driving, but you're still shooting enemies trying to take you down. After a crash, you're back on the ground finishing out the level, and man, they made this one significantly longer than the original. As I stated in my GoldenEye video, you can complete the first level in under a minute on agent mode by simply just running, pressing a couple buttons, and shooting one lock. This one is a bit more complicated with checkpoints, following 006's orders, taking photographs of helicopters, sneaking up on guards, and getting to the extraction point. 006 then parachutes off the dam, and right when Bond is about to do the same, he gets stopped by some guards, sets off the parachute in their stupid faces, and just yeets himself off the dam, segueing into the theme song. This level gives off a good impression for the game, with it having plenty of new stuff. It's not incredibly long or anything, but there did come a time while playing where I was kinda ready for it to end. To be honest, it made me kinda wish I was playing the original, and whether that's a fair assessment or not, it was my initial reaction. But I'm also not a GoldenEye purist. I know the game has its fair share of flaws, so maybe it's the nostalgia talking. I will say that I really accepted Daniel Craig in the role pretty quick. I wasn't going through the level wishing it were Brosnan instead, so I'll give the game that. Our title theme is, well, the GoldenEye theme, imagine that.
More than darkness in the depths. See him surface whenever a shadow. On the winds I feel his breath. GoldenEye found his weakness. GoldenEye will do what I please. GoldenEye, no time for sweetness, but
This song was non-existent in the original game, so in my opinion, this is a significant upgrade over the 64 one. I don't love the song or anything, but it is part of the GoldenEye experience, and I think it has to be here. It was written by Bono and The Edge, but performed by Nicole Scherzinger of Pussycat Dolls fame instead of Tina Turner. I don't know if they asked Tina or what happened, but it's a pretty decent recreation of her version. I guess this game is all about recreation, so why not replace her too? Weird that Dame Judi Dench voices M in that regard. But let's check out the infamous facility level next. Bond and Matt Damon split up as you take the vents route into the bathroom. More so mirroring the movie, you get to appear upside down in front of a man on the toilet to punch him out. If you've seen the film, this makes more sense. Make your way through the facility, sneaking up on folks, disabling cameras and the like. The look of it feels a bit more grunge than the 64 one and more like the one in the film, so I like this change. I can tell they're trying to implement a combination of film and game elements here. This one has much more of a focus on computers and servers. And hey, maybe this is Dr. Doak, everyone's favorite scientist? Let's pretend it's Dr. Doak. He's in a lab coat and all. One other thing that's pretty cool is that you're sneaking around with Alec in other areas and have to help him a couple times, like distracting some scientists. Lastly, you must go through and place the charges on each fuel tank to end the level in a pretty faithful recreation of the scene in the movie. They even implement Bond wheeling the cart inching his way to the exit. Alec is then shot by Oromov, thus concluding the intro to the game. So there we have it, some quick initial thoughts that I have. Some things I believe they improved upon over the original. The graphics, obviously. They aren't substantial, even for 2010, but so much cleaner and realistic than the 64. I also love the original music, but this time they got David Arnold to compose it, and it feels so much more cinematic this way. The voice acting is also a huge improvement over none. Daniel Craig is always great to hear, and Dame Judi Dench as well. I love that they tried to utilize more things from the movie here too. Some little touches here and there, but they work. Lastly, I think they did a great job having you care about the relationship between Bond and Alec.
Last one out buys the first route. You're on.
You can tell they know what they're doing and are on another mission together, so if you aren't familiar with the story, seeing him shot at the end of the facility level is more impactful. Certainly compared to the 64 one, where he just walks around spouting text and then the level ends when you escape. You don't actually see what happens to him at all. As far as things I think are better in the original, I mean they're largely nostalgia based. I absolutely love the controls with the 64 controller, although I could be alone there, and am able to fly through the game and feel like I'm skilled at it. Of course I would need to practice that a bit more here, but I never felt like I was really in control. I stated that you do feel the camaraderie between James and Alec, but it's also clear that he's the one running the show, giving you orders, so at the same time, him yelling at you if you're going the wrong way or not doing something in time also makes me miss the solo experience in the original game. That game is simply a video game legend, so you can't really replace its charm. Sometimes polishing something too much can take away from how it used to be. With that said, yeah, I can see this being a fun game to master. They did a really nice job with it from what I've seen, and a lot of people agreed with it, receiving a solid B or A- grade. Unfortunately, unlike its predecessor's success on the 64, this one did not make the top 60 best-selling Wii games or anything. Even though I wasn't excited for this at the time, that's honestly a little surprising, especially with the reception that it got. Even Big Beach Sports beat this one out. But what GoldenEye on the 64 is really known for is its multiplayer. And yeah, they put a bit of effort in making this a fun multiplayer experience here. There are enough modes and those classic GoldenEye characters like Jaws and Oddjob are playable. If you like the control style, you'll have fun with this one. I know I brush over the multiplayer sections for most of these games, but they're pretty self-explanatory. Get some friends, agree on their settings, run around and shoot each other. But there is still one more release, the Nintendo DS, until we get into GoldenEye Reloaded, released 1 year later for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. Since N-Space developed GoldenEye Rogue Agent for the DS, I'm basically expecting something similar to that. And I'm kinda right. Gone is the weird but interesting book style of gameplay from Quantum of Solace with playing the DS on its side, and we're back to the first-person perspective. And you know what? It's a pretty decently faithful adaptation of the Wii one, just much more pixelated due to obvious limitations. By the time this game was released in late 2010, Nintendo's successor to the DS was due out just a few months later, the Nintendo 3DS, obviously boasting 3D capabilities while keeping the DS split-screen touchscreen format. Also, I think there is a huge difference in graphical improvements on the 3DS over the DS, but unfortunately there was never a Bond game released for the 3DS. Bloodstone came out the same day as GoldenEye for the DS, and the last Bond game to date, 007 Legends, was not released on any handheld device. So basically this and Bloodstone are as good as it'll ever get in terms of handheld Bond games, at least in terms of graphical capabilities. So instead of starting in that well-known area of the dam that both GoldenEye games begin with, you start alongside 006 after a checkpoint at some random point in the dam. Shooting is basically the same as the Wii one with the DS controls, and this one likes to interrupt you to show you where to go and what to do for your next objectives. You kinda know the drill with these handheld ones now though. It's kinda cool that they're able to pull this off, and having the option of a Bond game on the go is cool to see, but it's certainly not the preferred version. Even by 2010, it's a pretty ugly game, especially with gamers being able to experience the 3DS just a few months later. Critically, no, this game didn't grab a lot of fans with a pretty standard D or F grade. And there was actually multiplayer on this one. Multiplayer on the DS requires a lot of extra effort for little reward though, especially now with the DS online servers well shut down. Essentially, this game kinda came and went. I'll get to the next game, Bloodstone, in the next part, but let's briefly jump ahead into the future 1 year to November 2011. Activision made the decision to remaster GoldenEye 007 on the Wii and release it on its 7th gen console counterparts, the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. This was going to be called GoldenEye 007 Reloaded, and they were going to utilize these systems' much higher graphical qualities over the Wii to make it look even better graphically. Fortunately, I would say yes, they succeeded in this. It does look quite a bit better. Unfortunately for this retrospective, I don't have much more to say about it. It's the same game, just with better graphics. There were a few minor tweaks to adapt to the other consoles, like compatibility with PlayStation Move, their version of a motion controller. Not my thing, but okay. Critically though, I was surprised to see that this isn't considered the definitive version. It mostly falls in a solid C category, and its saving grace at the time was its multiplayer, something largely forgotten now 10 years after its release. So yeah, I guess the Wii version got its revenge this time around. Quantum of Solace on the Wii was by far the worst one according to critics, and this time it's the best version. If the graphics don't make or break a game for you, I guess go with the Wii one. But as for me personally, I'll take the N64 one, and I fully admit it's the nostalgia talking. It's just fun to sit down and play. But this remake certainly did improve on some things, and I can appreciate that instead of being in the mindset of, it's not the N64 controller, then no thanks. Check this one out though for a nice mix of nostalgia and a more modern take. I know I enjoyed it more than Quantum of Solace. Next time, we're going back to November of 2010 to the exact same day as the release of GoldenEye for the Wii. This time, we will be straying away from movie tie-ins and getting an original and unique story for the Daniel Craig era. Until this new game is released in the future, this is the last original story we will get to, as 007 Legends is a bit of a Bond medley. But join me next time as we discuss GoldenEye's release counterpart. James Bond will return in Bloodstone.